Hey everybody, this is John for Pioneer Nexus MTG coming at you with a quick deck tech for Lotus Field combo with some adjustments suggested by some of the viewers. We'll get into that in a second. As a friendly reminder, if you do like these Lotus Field gameplay videos, please consider subscribing to the channel, giving us a thumbs up, and leaving a constructive comment down below, either about the gameplay or maybe about card adjustments to the list that we're currently playing. So a lot of people have suggested moving to the Dark Petition variant, which is a card we did try in some of our first couple of videos, and then we made some adjustments. Now it seems like coming back to it is a good idea. Dark Petition opens up a lot of more direct lines than the other builds that we were running, allowing you to have even more tutors in your deck. In addition to Fae of Wishes and Mastermind's Acquisition, you'll have access to another card that can allow you to search cards out of your library, and notably, this allows you to if you have Spell Mastery, add 3 black mana, so it only becomes effectively a 2 mana play, and allows you to have much more lines to get to your omniscience to win the game much more easily than having to play Pour Over the Pages, Hidden Strings a lot, tapping for a bunch of mana, and then trying to find your way to your approach of the Second Sun. Advantages over this one, over the other one, you have a lot more play lines around things like Narset, which is a card that we ran into particularly in the last video. Allows you to have a lot more lines where you don't have to draw cards through the hate piece that is Narset. And, once again, it does give you a lot more access to cards, especially in the post-board games, when you bring in cards that are good for a specific matchup, such as sweepers or ways to deal with hate pieces for Lotus Field combo itself. Beyond that, the list is largely intact as far as the main deck. We cut a one copy of Emergent Ultimatum and 1 copy of Dig Through Time for the 2 Dark Petitions. Other than that, it's largely the same list we've been playing. One difference I've had, maybe it's basically training wheels compared to some more experienced pilots with the deck, but I do play the copy of Fae of Wishes in addition to Mastermind's Acquisition, which gives you 2 cards to be able to fetch your win con out of your sideboard. Otherwise, you can get in these weird situations where your either Mastermind's Acquisition or Fae gets exiled, and then you have no way to win the game in a reasonable fashion. As far as the sideboard, we made some adjustments. We brought in 3 past apparel over the Supreme Verdicts, and I think one of the copies of Behold the Multiverse. The reason for this is obviously when you're fetching something with Dark Petition, you get black mana, which makes it much easier to cast something like Path to Peril or Languish. Path to Peril obviously helping to slow down the aggressive decks that can be problematic otherwise. The rest of the sideboard, we've kind of not been impressed by Zakama. I think it's kind of a go-over-the-top cute card that a lot of people play. Sure, there are some situations where it's particularly good, but a lot of times it's just a win-more card that doesn't really solve a lot of the problems the deck currently has. Pithing Needle, obviously, this is primarily for Karn. Shutting that down is key, especially against the mono-green matchup. Terra Sunder, this has just kind of become the catch-all against all the various hate cards, while also being the ability to be kicked and deal with problematic creatures like Sheoldred. This gives you a clean answer to things like Sheoldred, Damping Sphere, Alpine Moon, etc. Path to Peril we've already kind of talked about. Mystical Disputes and Sphinx of the Final Word, along with Thought Distortion. This is kind of your anti-counter spell package. Sphinx obviously pairs with Leer to make your spells uncounterable. Mystical Dispute helps you to fight the blue decks a little bit more fairly. And Thought Distortion, if you resolve it, is usually pretty close to good game against blue-white control, etc. Although they do have Narset's Reversal that you sometimes have to be careful about. Leaving one of Behold the Multiverse in the sideboard, there are some situations where you still need a grindy card. This certainly helps. Also, it's a nice wish card for granted sometimes whenever you're in a low resource game and just need to find more raw cards. Leyline of Sanctity, this is primarily here for discard or any type of, because it can bring it in against any type of burn deck, and as you'll see in this video, we also brought it in against a mill player. Although mill is kind of uncommon in the format, it still is a nice bonus to have a card that you're already having in your sideboard for any type of Thoughtseize-esque decks. Then Approach of the Second Sun, obviously this is your win con. This generally never leaves the sideboard. You can win the game in other ways, like Sphinx of the Final Word beat down against control and such, but generally Approach of the Second Sun is just the cleanest way to win the game, especially when you're playing the Omniscience version. Alright, so we're going to do a quick replay of some matches that I played in the practice rooms. So I'm going to try not to stop too many times until it's kind of relevant. Looking at the opening hand, this is one of the better hands for Lotus Field combo outside of something like Arboreal Grazer to speed the hand up. You have 2 lands to be able to sacrifice to Lotus Field. You have Lotus Field and Thespian Stage without having to search. You have Hidden Strings as mana acceleration to be able to cast your Immersion Ultimatum. And you have Leer as kind of protection against counterspells, be able to rebuy your Hidden Strings. Opponent plays Hallowed Fountain, passes. We draw something exciting, Sylvan Scrying. That will allow us to tutor up another land, a utility land perhaps, and we're against Spirits. Our opponent plays a Shacklegeist and passes. We do nothing. Seems like we should possibly have used Sylvan Scrying there, but we play Sylvan Scrying, or float some mana, sacrifice the Lotus Field, grab Odawaru just as a utility land to buy us some time against our opponent's somewhat aggressive start. Hit us for 3 and pass. Then this is where things start to get interesting. Our opponent goes to their attacks. I'm going to pause here so we can actually go through the important turn. Copy our Lotus Field with the Thespian Stage, float some mana, Hidden Strings, get a bunch of mana. Go to cast Leer here. So Leer, with this play, we're able to play around our opponent having Spellcaller. We also get the ability to play around any one of their 1 soft counters, so no Lofty Denial or Geist Light Snare would not be able to get this, so they would need 2 counters to be able to counter this. And then we would still have the potential ability to cycle Vizier to buy us even more mana. Eventually we can flash back Hidden Strings, cast Omniscience, use Ultimatum to get whatever tutors we need to find Approach of the Second Sun and win the game. And once this is in play, our opponent can't really do anything about it. They really don't play too many copies of something like Brazen Borrower in game number 1 to balance this. So once this resolves, the game's effectively over because the opponent has no meaningful interaction for what we're doing. And, you know, they don't have a fast enough clock this game. Usually blue-white or mono-blue would have some type of like Curious Obsession or something that would make the game a little bit harder, or maybe just a little bit of pressure. I'm not sure what their hand could be other than maybe like a soft counter and much more lands, because they weren't playing out more Spirits to continue the pressure. Other possibility is they could have Spellcaller in hand, but I think they would have Spellcaller the Hidden Strings if they would have had the opportunity. So their hand must have just been kind of bad, and then Leer was kind of the nail in the coffin for them. Checking out the sideboarding before game 2, we boarded out 1 copy of Pore Over the Pages and an Impulse and a Vizier to bring in a Balagid Recovery to bring in the copies of Sphinx of the Final Word, a couple Paths of Peril, and the Mystical Disputes to kind of fight through what our opponent's doing. One of the weird things with tempo decks is sometimes you have to both account for the creatures and account for the counter spells, so you can't really afford to bring in Thought Distortion and such, as you're starting to bring in too many cards at that point. And that's pretty much what we did with our sideboarding. Whether it's correct or not, we'll see here in a sec. See how the opening hand is. Our opening hand has a Sylvan Scrying and a Lotus Field, so we effectively have access to all that we need as far as being able to get our Lotus Field and Thespian Stages online. We have Hidden Strings and Pore Over the Pages as Mana Acceleration, and Impulse and Pore Over the Pages for Meaningful Dig. So our opponent opens up on Hallowed Fountain into Mausoleum Wanderer, which is a little bit of disruption in the early turns potentially. We just naturally draw Thespian Stage, get to be a Luxac, I guess. Opponent plays Shacklegeist again. Once again, not meaningful other than it adds to the pressure on the board. Opponent passes. We go ahead and play Sylvan Scrying. They counter it. Isn't really meaningful as we already have Thespian Stage. That was kind of a bait spell to both ease the pressure on the board and also to... it would have been nice to resolve and get a utility land, but we already kind of had all the pieces we need. Our opponent just continues to counter whatever they can, going after our Impulse, thinking we're digging for land still. We get to sacrifice our lands, get the Lotus Field set up, and then our opponent starts beating down, hitting us for 4. So we're under quite a bit of pressure, but I think if we resolve this Leer, they're just kind of dead. So they hit us for 4 again. We're gonna, at the end step, we're going to be copying Thespian Stage. And I make the mistake and tap the wrong land, or copy the wrong land here. So we're lucky that our opponent doesn't have more pressure in play, or that would have been a lethal mistake. Okay, just play the land and pass. Opponent does the thing, attacks for 4. We go ahead and float a bunch of mana, hidden strings, float some more mana, hidden strings, cast, and presume we'll go pour over the pages, looking to see if they try to hit us with a counterspell. They hit us with a Dovin's Veto. We cast a Leer and start casting a bunch of stuff from our graveyard again, making sure to cipher the hidden strings onto our Leer again. Our opponent is a trooper for staying in the game. Go ahead and cast Behold the Beyond, and at that point they concede because we can just pretty much cast anything in our deck and kill them any which way we choose. Our opponent says, "Well done, truly a solitaire master." Well, sometimes that's what you sign up for when you're playing a combo deck, and I'm sorry to our salty opponent. Alright, we're here for match number 2. Taking a look at this opening hand, we have Botanical Sanctum, Lotus Field. So this hand is a bit of a gamble because we really need to draw a second land, but beyond that we have Impulse to dig for another Sylvan Scrying or a Thespian Stage, and beyond that the hand's a lot clunky, but I think any hand, especially on the draw, that has, you know, land plus Lotus Field, you can risk keeping, because if you hit any second land or a Galabed Recovery, you can play as a land. Both those allows you to play your Lotus Field, and then, you know, Lotus Field obviously allows you to use your Impulse. Hidden Strings allows you to hardcast a lot of what's going on here. Omniscience is a little bit awkward to draw, as is Behold the Beyond, but these are both cards that can be nice payoffs, and then Mastermind's Acquisition can let you find anything that you need. Opponent plays a Island in Ruin Crab. We got lucky and drew Temple of Mastery, which is the land we needed. We scryed to the top. We know whatever we kept on top, our opponent was going to mill anyway. Opponent does the milling thing, does some more milling. This is going to go on for a little while until we get the setup. Honestly, the very beginning setup of Lotus Field is a little bit boring, but it's quite repetitive if things are going the correct way. Really comes, the opponent plays Fraying Sanctity, which is absolutely terrifying. We play Lotus Field, sacrifice our lands, pass the turn. Opponent continues with the Fraying Sanity. Opponent is just mono blue mill, so nothing terribly exciting on either side of the board until actual combo turn. And it's going to get complicated by all the cards we've lost in the graveyard. We go ahead, cycle Vizier, still looking for Thespian Stage. We go ahead and Dark Petition to get Thespian Stage before all the copies are gone. Our opponent continues to mill us. We are going to be down to, I believe, 6 cards at the end of turn. So the big thing in this has been Fraying Sanity. At the beginning of each end step, Enchanted player mills X cards, where X is the number of cards that have been put in their graveyard. This really accelerates our opponent's mill plan, turns all their mill 3s into mill 6s, punishes us for putting cards in our own graveyard, etc. So we basically have 5 cards left in our deck at this point. Most of our key pieces are actually already out of the deck, so we have to find a way with the cards in hand to actually be able to win the game. And we have access to a ton of mana. We have access to Omniscience. So the line is going to be get Omniscience into play, cast Mastermind's Acquisition, grab Approach of the Second Sun, cast Behold the Beyond, get Approach of the Second Sun back, win the game. So that's pretty much what we're going to do this turn, with the added complication that we have to copy this turn. We go ahead, get a bunch of mana, cast the Omniscience, cast that, get the Approach, cast the Behold the Beyond, get the Approach back, and win the game. So kind of lucky that we actually had all of those 1-0s in our hand to start the game, because our opponent just would have taken away our ability to actually get the cards we needed. and no matter what we did, we were most likely dead the following turn, because if they draw a land, we were dead. If they draw any type of mill spell, we're dead. So it was just important that we go off that turn. One of the things when you're playing a combo deck like Lotus Field combo is you have to understand exactly how much time your opponent's clock is giving you, whether that's milling you, whether that's pressure from creatures, whether that's pressure from something like Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. You have to understand what your opponent's key turn is and buy yourself as much time as possible to draw as many resources as possible, and then kind of go off, usually the turn before you would die. Kind of a key to a lot of these different combo decks. Alright, taking a look at sideboarding for Mono Blue Mill. The main cards you have to worry about are obviously them bringing in soft counter spells and the mill spells themselves. We brought in the Leyline of Sanctities, as a lot of their mill is targeted, and their aura also targets target player. So if you can get Leyline of Sanctity down before they get their aura down, then you can potentially keep them from really milling us. Beyond that, we also brought in a couple copies of Mystical Dispute to fight over their soft counter spells they might bring in. Just as a kind of way to keep them at bay, and also, obviously, since most of their deck is mono blue, you can counter their relevant spells. We boarded out the Arboreal Grazers and the one Balaged Recovery. They're the fastest deck in the world, so it doesn't hurt to slow your deck down just a tiny bit, but obviously a little bit risky, as sometimes you do want to go fast against a deck that can mill you fairly quickly once it gets Frank Sanity into play. Taking a look at the opening hand here, we have access to 1 land plus Lotus Field plus Sylvan Scrying. This hand's a little bit of gamble because, once again, we do need to draw a second land, but beyond that, has pretty much everything we need. We have Hidden Strings and Pour Over the Pages to kind of accelerate us and see more cards. We have Baral to make our spells cheaper, and obviously looting if we happen to counter something with Mystical Dispute. So, pretty much everything we need if we draw a second non-Lotus Field land. Instead, we draw Leyline of Sanctity, which is fine. Our opponent passes the turn. We draw a second land right on time. It's possible I should have played Sylvan Scrying here, but I wanted to hold up Mystical Dispute, plus not run into Sylvan Scrying into a counterspell. We kind of get lucky here. They try to cast an Ashiok, which would have made Sylvan Scrying that much worse, so it was kind of nice to get that under a counterspell. Play our Lotus Field, sack our lands, pass the turn. Opponent gets to play Fraying Sanity here, which puts us on a noticeable clock. We try to play Leyline of Sanctity here. They have Spell Pierce, so we don't get to basically the instant win KO against their deck, but still, they've had to expend a lot of resources, and they haven't had a lot of mill so far, so we just pass the turn, doing our setup. Opponent with a crab, but no land to go with it. We go ahead and copy the land here at the end of turn. And with Fraying Sanity trigger, we pass the turn. And we copy again, or cast a Brawl, use Hidden Strings, cast Emergent Ultimatum here. Ideally, I think we would grab Behold the Beyond, Dark Petition, and Omniscience, so no matter what we get, we resolve Omniscience. I think I do, I choose Leer, Dark Petition, and Pour Over the Pages. I guess because they have so much mana open, I want to make sure our spells resolve. Play Pour Over the Pages, play Leer. Our opponent plays Spell Pierce on Pour Over the Pages. We choose to untap those, discard that, and then from here we should pretty much be able to find a way to win. Casting Pour Over the Pages, once again, Hidden Strings, adding the Cipher to Leer, use Mastermind's Acquisition to catch the Approach, Pour Over the Pages to do the thing, we go ahead and cast Approach, use Dark Petition, find Approach, Pour Over the Pages, and cast Approach again. Opponent commenting that maybe their hand wasn't very good, wasn't a very good hand, maybe I should just mull it aside. Matchup is usually somewhat even. Now, I've never played against Mono Blue Mill in the entire Pioneer format, but it is a deck that it kind of exists, and I can see why could be a difficult matchup. especially if you saw in game 1, if we didn't hit our key pieces in our hand, we wouldn't have had access to them with our normal tutors. So much like a deck like Amulet Titan in a format like Modern, if you continue to mill them and put a bunch of their key cards in the graveyard, sometimes they just can't find the pieces to win the game. But you know, we happen to have a couple tutors in our hand that got stuff out of our sideboard. We won with Approach, and then game 2 they kept kind of the slower hand, and we had a lot of our pieces and got lucky to draw that second land in fairly quick succession on the draw. Alright, for the third match, taking a look at the opening hand here, we obviously have Sylvan Scrying, Lotus Field, Balagad Recovery. So we have 2 lands to play, Lotus Field, a couple copies of Sylvan Scrying, plus Fate of Wishes and Pore of the Pages. The only thing we're lacking is an early accelerator like Hidden Strings or Vizier, but this hand is serviceable overall. Our opponent opens on Sacred Foundry and a favored Hoplite, so we're going to be under quite a bit of pressure early on, as the heroic deck tends to put on a quick clock and threatens to kill us very quickly. Favored Hoplite does us 3 damage. Pass the turn. Arboreal Grazer, a little bit awkward this turn. I still think we cast it here. I guess we choose to get Sylvan Scrying for Thespian Stage. It's possible that we should have played this out just as early defense, but they had God's Willing anyway, so it wouldn't have been terribly relevant. Take a hit for 5. We may be dead before we can set up because their clock is quite enormous. We play Thespian Stage out, play Arboreal Grazer, put out Thespian Stage, Lotus Field, put out Thespian Stage. Our opponent has Monastery Swizzle Spear, has 10th District Legionnaire. The only decision we really have is, do we like block one of these guys and hope our Arboreal Grazer this lives, or do we try to buy ourselves some extra time? I chose to take the biggest damage thing off the field. Play out Fate of Wishes here as a blocker. They have the Reckless Rage, so it wouldn't have mattered last turn if we would have blocked one of their smaller guys, because we wouldn't have been able to do anything. And Invigorated Rampage, just for the win here. But this is kind of the problem that a deck like Heroic puts you under, is especially if you don't have a good plan with Arboreal Grazer and go off before turn 4, or turn 4-ish, you just die because their aggression gets you. And they have just enough interaction for your creatures to kill you quickly through an Arboreal Grazer or a Fate of Wishes, as we saw there. And not much you can do game 1, other than hope you have that draw and win. Taking a look at sideboarding before game number 2. Obviously, we need to be as quick as possible and still have disruption for them. You bring in the 3 copies of Path to Peril, and I don't believe we brought in a whole lot else. We brought in one of the copies of Terra Sunder just in case they have some type of random hate like Damping Sphere or something. Alpine Moon is something they could also be playing. But generally their deck is fast enough, they don't need a whole lot of disruption against us. Path to Peril obviously gets almost all of their creatures without the cleave effect, so it's quite nice that we only have to spend the 3 mana as opposed to the 6. We trimmed an Impulse and a Vizier, as well as a Balagad Recovery to slow them down. Balagad's fine, especially in an attrition matchup, but we still have 2 copies in the deck. And then also we cut... So we brought in, cut Vizier, cut Impulse, cut this, cut the Balagad for the 3 copies of Path to Peril and a Terra Sunder. Taking a look at this opening hand, we have 2 lands, Sylvan Scrying, Otawara as a bounce spell, a couple copies of Path to Peril. Well, we don't have a guaranteed copy of Thespian Stage, at least very quickly, because obviously we can cast Sylvan Scrying, Balagad it back, so we do have access to all of our lands, but notably that we have the 2 copies of Path to Peril once we get the Lotus Field in play to deal with their early creature rush. They play a Swizzle Spear and attack, pass the turn. We go ahead, probably Sylvan Scrying for Lotus Field next turn. Oh, we just draw the Lotus Field, which saves us a little bit of time. We go ahead, grab the Thespian Stage, pass back to our opponent. Our opponent plays 10th District Legionnaire, attacks with our 2 hasty creatures, hits us. So we're going to take a nice chunk next turn once we find a way to untap our Lotus Field. We draw Vizier, which is probably the best card in the deck at this point. allowing us to untap the Lotus Field immediately and cast Path to Peril, sweeping their board. Pass the turn, opponent with no pressure. They play another Swizzle Spear. They make it big. They smack us real hard. So we have a couple different lines here. We can potentially just cast another sweeper and play out Thespian Stage. Alternatively, we can play Thespian Stage, copy Lotus Field, play out the Arboreal Grazer as a blocker. Not sure what the correct line here would be. Grazer as a blocker is fine. It's unlikely they're going to be able to kill us from 11. There are some draws that would enable it, so maybe it is correct to just go ahead and take the slow path, or slow choice, and Path to Peril this creature away. Let's see what I ended up doing. We copied Thespian Stage, played out Arboreal Grazer, played out Odawaru. So we'll see if our opponent can kill us here. They Reckless Rage our creature down, double Reckless Rage. Homestead Courage. They're going to deal us quite a bit of damage here. They chunk us for 8, or for 7, put us to 4. So next turn we get to Path to Peril them and cast Baral, it looks like. Yep, Baral. Get back Vizier. Opponent has to Defiant Strike our creature. We could cycle Vizier here, but if we miss, it's kind of like pointless. And there's not too many draws our opponent can kill us with from here at 0 resources. They are a mixed resource deck. They need both creatures and spells, especially when we have a couple of blockers, so there's no rush to cycle this Vizier. We cycle Vizier now that we have the Balaged Recovery, Acquisition to get Ultimatum, which may or may not have been correct, but this just gets us a lot of resources. Virtuoso puts us under potentially a lot of pressure. This turn we're going to cast Ultimatum for Dark Petition, Behold the Beyond, and probably Omniscience. This is usually a guaranteed kill, but I think I flopped here because I think I cast you have to cast the Dark Petition first. And I accidentally cast the Behold the Beyond, which made this much more difficult than it needed to be. Usually you want to put Dark Petition on the stack first to get Hidden Strings, and then cast Behold the Beyond. Then you can Behold the Beyond for Omniscience, 2 tutors, and Omniscience and 2 tutors, and then you can Dark Petition for Hidden Strings. The Dark Petition, because you have 2 instants or sorcerers in your graveyard, it gives you 3 mana. Dark Petition with 1, or Hidden Strings with 1 blue mana floating, then becomes down to 2, gain an additional 6, or sorry, 3 mana. If you have a blue 4 mana, Hidden Strings 2, untap this is just a kill. But Behold the Beyond we have to cast first, so I kind of goofed up here. So it makes things a little bit awkward, so I just grabbed something random, I think. I used Terra Sunder to kill their Illuminator Virtuoso, just to buy us time because of the goof up. I grab Leer, Hidden Strings, Omniscience, and then cast Hidden Strings, cast Leer, cast Hidden Strings again, and our opponent concedes. But I don't know that we actually had the kill here. 3, 9 mana. I guess it didn't matter at this point. We had access to Petition and Mastermind's Acquisition, so we could have gotten another Hidden Strings, eventually cast the Omniscience and just win. But our opponent did concede, but at this point they were so far down on resources, and we had so many potential chump blockers, plus Baral causing our spells to be cheaper. It was just pretty much a win guaranteed from this point, but I still think it was a premature concession, as they don't know what our last card in hand is, but we did tutor a lot, so more reason for them to concede, I guess. Alright, back for game number 3. We're going to be on the draw this game, which is very dangerous against a deck that puts up that big of a clock. First hand was a mulligan. This hand is a little bit slow, but we do have 2 lands, Lotus Field, plus a Vizier to cycle Hidden Strings and pour over the pages. So I think this hand's a keep, even if it is a bit slow against them. They go ahead and Swizzle Spear attack us. Just cycle through these early turns. I think I made another... Correct play is Botanical Sanctum into Arboreal Grazer into Temple, but I think I actually punted here. Yeah, I played out the Temple first, left the Sylvan, or bottom the Sylvan Scrying. Virtuoso. We're going to be under a lot of pressure here. Play out, or actually, I guess I topped the Sylvan Scrying. Cast Arboreal Grazer, put the Lotus Field into play. Now we have a chump blocker for next turn, potentially. Depends on what they have here. They have Ancestral Anger. They have Ancestral Anger. So our opponent's getting a really big, beefy double striker that's going to hit us for a ton here. Going to put us under a lot of pressure. And if we don't find a sweeper next turn, we're likely dead. We chump block the Swift Spear here because it's our really only play. And we take 14. Puts us down to 4. We draw a Breeding Pool. So we start by cycling Vizier. We shock in, mainly because I wanted to still have access to the Otawaro. Cast Pour over the pages and get lucky to draw Path to Peril. We use Path to Peril to clean up their board, buy us a lot of time. Our opponent has a follow-up Feather, which is lethal on its own. We just pass the turn. It's possible I should have just done this main phase. Go ahead and they cast Feather. We bounce it with Otawaro. I don't think God's Willing would save them here, because that's a colorless source, and God's Willing is a lot of creature or protection from a color. They wisely wait until after you have to use something to deal with their creature. Cast a Homestead Courage, grow their creature. I choose here to Hidden Strings. Not sure what I was looking for. I think I was trying to do Balaged plus Cleave in one turn, but I just don't think we had enough mana. So I'm just going to bounce this Otawaro without another Otawaro main phase. They play Feather again, play some Ancestral Angers, play some Defiant Strikes, get their engine online, draw a bunch of cards, get their crap back with Feather. We draw an Emergent Ultimatum, set up the combo here. I believe it gets done correctly this time. Behold the Beyond has to get Leer, Pour, and an island? Question mark. Leer, Omniscience, Island. This allows me to flash back the Hidden Strings in the graveyard. I grab Hidden Strings, float some mana, untap these, cast Leer, use it to play Hidden Strings in the graveyard, put it on Leer, put more Hidden Strings, Balaged Recovery, pour over the pages back, cast Pour, pitch a land, cast Omniscience, cast Pour, cast Dark Petition from the graveyard. Opponent went whoops here. I wonder if they had access to Reckless Rage, possibly. And we cast this, grab Approach of the Second Sun, and then we should be able to win from there. Because we have access to another Hidden Strings, pour over the pages, we would have been able to cast Approach, dig for it, cast Approach again, and win the game. So, nice to win that matchup, as that is generally one of Lotus Field's worst matchups, simply because of the pressure they put on us. Alright, back here with a quick wrap with Lotus Field combo, this version. Obviously we were playing a little bit of some games in the practice rooms this week, as I wanted to get a better feel for the Dark Petition build. Honestly, this version feels a little bit cleaner than the other version. Having access to so many tutors allows you a lot of different lines. Now obviously there were a lot of punts to be had here, but we're still able to come back and win all the matches. We got to see what the deck feels like under pressure. The use of Path to Peril in some of these matchups, especially against both Spirits and Heroic there. Very powerful card. Nice to have access to that sweeper. I really like the addition of Dark Petition back into the deck. Whether this version is better than some of the other variants running around, kind of hard to say, but I do like the list that we've been working on. The sideboard kind of comes together a lot better on the numbers. We still have outs to a lot of the different things, and I feel like we have a much more balanced thing for control and for other mid-range matchups, although we didn't see a ton of those this week. I do like the numbers being a little bit cleaner as far as the swapping in and out of things. But we will be running through a league next time here in 2 weeks, as I believe that'll be our first Lotus Field gameplay for 2023. We will be in a league at that point. I still think we'll be in Brothers War, so not a whole lot will have changed in the format by that point in time, as we'll start some league play with the Dark Petition build, and hopefully get some reps in with that, and learn a little bit more as far as learning to execute the deck a little bit better, and hopefully get you guys some better quality gameplay overall, just as I'm learning the deck more and more each week. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to check out our deck guides, as we're getting close to finishing up most of the known decks in the Pioneer format. So, hope to see you. You guys have a Merry Christmas, and I hope to see you going into 2023, coming back for some more videos on the channel.